Hello, in this video we're going to review how to take our petrophysical results and convert those into a series of maps. So to do this we need to think about what data goes into our flow, uh, how we pull in the interpretation, and how we're going to be transforming the data along the way. So in this case, this is based on log input, as most of our petrophysical interpretations are. So we'll select the relevant database. Then we will have a CPI log calc block. This is the block that allows us to pull in our petrophysical interpretations. And there's a few things we'll need to set here. First of all, we'll need to choose the properties that we'd like to make a map of. So here I've selected a number of the averages and summaries. And remember, for map properties, we should specifically be focusing on properties where we either have one value per curve or one value per zone. If it's a quote a normal curve like a gamma ray or resistivity, it doesn't make sense to map that curve itself. We want to map something like an average or a percentile of that curve. So that's why we've selected these specific properties here. We'll then choose our relevant CPI file, TOPS file, and well headers database, as well as our key wells. And if we're using any spatial data or interpolated tables, we can pull those in here, where we just hit the update button. If we want to output the results in a points format, we can do that here. This is optional, so I will be writing my points output here. I will be applying a point spatial filter. The point spatial filter allows us to look at a certain number of neighbor wells and then look at the interpercentile range to identify outliers. And it'll be identifying outliers based on how close, based on its closest neighbors. Then we will have the points to grid block. The points to grid block is what takes our points and converts these into a grid. To do this, you'll select the lat, the long, and the value, or potentially the XY if you're running in XY mode using coordinates. And you'll select the gridding method that you wish to use. And then finally, we'll choose to output the grids that we have here. A couple of things that I want to point out. I'm going to go ahead and hit the run button so this can initialize and start running. But I want to run through these, some of the key flow blocks one more time. So in the CPI log calc here, remember that we are only selecting, in this case, because we're making maps, both summaries or averages in this case. For our output, we need to make sure to think about what are we outputting. Well, we don't map logs, we map points. So we need to set our output mode as points. And in this case, because we're using TOPS, we're going to take points, one per curve per zone. So that's a key thing to mark there. If you leave this as logs, you'll actually receive an error here in your points output. It will, let's just click on this, and now you'll see it creates an error. And this error says the input type is LAS, we expected points. So that's a hint that we need to come back here and set that as points. For our point spatial filter, there are a couple of things here. Typically, you're going to want to group by both property and zone. So what this is, our points formats come out in Excel lingo, what would be called a pivot table type of format. We do that because it's a bit more compact. But what you'll want to do is you'll want to group your columns by property. And what that'll do is it'll say, oh, okay, I have the property here, average gamma ray final. And my zone is the Niobrara. So it'll know to group by those two criteria. And it'll do that for each zone and each property. So if you don't have that grouping, it might be worth inspecting the output of your points format. And then all you'll be asked to choose here is the value column. And it's important here if you're getting it from the CPI log calc, just to leave it at value. So the program does have some kind of built-in defaults that will make sense and help you set these. In the points to grid, once again, you'll need to choose your columns and your value. And once again, we have set the defaults so that they should come naturally through, as well as the grouping. Once again, it'll take property and zone by default if those are available. So those you can go through. And then finally, we just end with the grid output. And so then we're going to be ready to inspect our maps to see what those look like. So in this case, the resulting database here, which ties to my output, Welcome Project CPI Maps, Welcome Project CPI Maps, and this is a .grid file. And the way we've structured our grid files is that it's almost like a dictionary where we have a property and a zone. So here we're looking at the V-clay, the average V-clay in our net reservoir within the Lewis formation. You know, we can change that to a different formation like the Niobrara or the Carlisle. We can also go through and look at things like our average grain density, once again on a zone by zone basis here. So the benefit of this format is that you have all of your maps for all of your zones in one file, and we created those with essentially this one flow. And then you could go through, and if you want to run this for a different CPI file and generate the same list of maps for the zones relevant to that, you would just come in here and you would start off, you would select the correct log database, and then you would just swap out the CPI tops and well headers files as necessary, update your output names, and then you could hit the run button. And so that way you can generate, you know, in this case, around it's around 25 maps for 10 different zones. So we're generating around 250 maps with this flow. So it's quite an efficient way to generate a large number of maps for a large number of zones. If you would like to, let's say, modify this so that you only output maps for a single zone, you could do that simply by adding a new block, saying points select, and then we can move that up behind our points output, and we could select to do this for a single zone. And if we want to do it for a single property, we could either reduce this list to a single property, or we could put another points select block here, and instead of selecting by zone, we could select by property as well. The result of this flow would be that now we would generate this list of maps exclusively for the Niobrara formation.